They put my mom in the trunk. The boy's voice cut through the rain like a blade, and behind him, a black sedan idled at the curb, trunk cracked open just enough to catch the edge of a gray scarf fluttering in the storm. It was just past 11 when the knocking started. Sharp, desperate, completely out of place. Chaz Rodriguez had been reviewing doc manifests in a study when the sound came. 3 frantic knocks, then a child's voice breaking through the storm. "Please. Please, somebody help." No one knocked on Chaz Rodriguez's door. Not neighbors. Not strangers. Not unless they had a death wish. From his study, Chaz heard his security chief Mateo's voice in the foyer, low and confused. "Kid, you need to step back. My mom's in the trunk. Please." Chaz stood slowly. His men knew the protocol. Strangers stay outside, problems get handled quietly, and the boss never answers the door himself. But there was a rumor on the streets, just one, that Chaz wouldn't leave a kid standing in the rain. He reached the door before Mateo could stop him and pulled it open himself. A boy stood on his doorstep, no older than 8, drowning in a yellow raincoat 2 sizes too big. Rain streamed off the bright fabric, pooling at his bare, muddy feet. His face was streaked with tears and dirt, small fists clenched at his sides. Behind him, through the downpour, a black sedan sat at the curb, engine idling, trunk cracked open like a broken promise. The boy looked up at Chaz, not with fear, but with desperate, trembling hope. "Are you Mr. Rodriguez?" Chaz blinked. His men exchanged uncertain glances behind him. This wasn't the kind of emergency they were trained for. "Who told you that name?" Chaz asked quietly, crouching down to the boy's eye level. "My mom. She said if anything bad happened, find Chaz Rodriguez. She said you'd help." The boy's voice cracked. "They put her in the trunk. She's not moving. Please, mister." That word, mister, cut through Chaz's usual cold detachment. He didn't hear fear in the boy's voice. Just pure, desperate trust. Chaz stood and stepped out into the rain, ignoring Mateo's sharp intake of breath. "Get the med kit," he ordered, already moving down the steps.
"Now."
At the sedan, Chaz pulled the trunk fully open. Katherine Holman lay inside, wrists zip-tied behind her back, duct tape across her mouth, gray scarf caught on the latch. Her eyes snapped to his, furious and alive. He cut her bindings with his folding knife. Katherine tore the tape away, gasping. "They used your name, Chaz. They knew you'd open the door." Chaz glanced back at Mateo standing in the doorway. Something flickered in his security chief's expression. This wasn't ransom. It was choreography. Before we go further, hit subscribe because this story proves one choice can rewrite a city's rules. And you won't want to miss what happens when the man who never opens his door realizes someone's been selling the pattern. The West Parlor had never been built for mercy, but tonight it became a triage room. Katherine sat wrapped in heavy blankets near the fireplace, oxygen mask pressed to her face, while one of Chaz's house physicians checked her vitals with swift, practiced hands. Her fingers were still pale from the cold, but color was returning. David stood rooted in the doorway like a sentry, yellow raincoat dripping onto the hardwood, refusing to sit, refusing to leave his post. Chaz moved through the room in silence, adjusting the angle of a mounted security camera by half an inch, then another. His phone was already out, fingers moving across the screen. Text to traffic division contacts, camera feeds he'd need pulled from the route between Katherine's neighborhood and here. No sirens. No official reports. Just quiet omniscience, the kind that made men like Chaz dangerous without ever raising his voice. "David," Chaz said gently, not looking up from his phone. "You're safe here. You can sit." The boy shook his head, eyes locked on his mother. "I have to watch." Katherine reached out, squeezing his hand. "Baby, I'm okay. Tell Mr. Rodriguez what you heard." David's jaw tightened, trying to be brave. "The men, when they put Mom in the trunk, they were talking. One of them said, 'Rodriguez will come to the door himself. He always does.'" The boy's voice dropped to a whisper. "They said you can't help it. That someone told them." The room went still. Chaz's thumbs stopped mid-scroll. Behind him, Mateo shifted his weight, boots creaking on the floor. Chaz looked up slowly, his gaze cutting to his security chief. "Step outside with me, Mateo." In the hall, away from Katherine and David, Chaz stood with his back to the study door, arms crossed. Rain still drummed against the windows. Mateo met his eyes, steady but tense. "You sold my hours, not my secrets," Chaz said quietly. No anger, just cold, surgical fact. "My patterns. When I open the door, who I won't turn away. You gave them the blueprint." Mateo's jaw worked. For a moment, he looked like he might deny it. Then his shoulders sagged. "I didn't tell them anything operational. Just routines. Times. They paid well, Chaz. I didn't think. You didn't think they'd use it to put a woman and a kid in a trunk." Chaz's voice was flat, controlled. "Now you're going to drive me to the man who bought them." Mateo blinked. "What?" Chaz turned back toward the parlor, where David still stood guard in his too big raincoat. "Get the cars ready. We're going to Pier 14. He paused at the doorway, glancing back. "And Mateo? The boy rides with me. In the back seat." The message was clear. David Williams was no longer a witness. He was a shield. A reminder. A line Mateo had helped someone cross. 20 minutes later, the convoy rolled into the storm, 3 black SUVs cutting through rain-slicked streets, headlights carving tunnels through the dark. In the back seat of the lead vehicle, Chaz sat beside David, the boy's small hand gripping the edge of his yellow raincoat. Ahead, through the windshield, the city blurred and bled. Somewhere out there, at Pier 14, a man named Rico Sabatini was about to learn what happened when you mistook patience for weakness. Pier 14 sat at the edge of the city like a rotting tooth, cranes looming overhead like gallows, shipping containers stacked in rusted towers, and the kind of darkness that swallowed sound. 2 SUVs were already parked near the loading dock, headlights cutting pale cones through the rain. Between them stood Rico Sabatini, grinning blade-thin, flanked by 4 men whose hands rested a little too casually near their waistbands. Chaz's convoy pulled up 30 feet away, engines idling, wipers beating against the downpour. He stepped out first, leaving David in the back seat with one of the veterans, and walked forward alone. Mateo followed 2 paces behind, silent and pale. Rico spread his arms wide, rainwater streaming off his expensive coat. Chaz Rodriguez. In person. At night. In the rain. He laughed, sharp and ugly. "Tell Florence Nightingale we warmed the trunk for her." Chaz stopped 10 feet away, hands at his sides, expression unreadable. "I came to end a mistake." Rico's grin widened. "Whose?" "Yours." The word hung in the air for half a breath. Then Chaz moved. He drew and fired twice, not at men, but at the overhead work lights. Glass exploded, plunging half the dock into shadow. Rico's men lunged for their weapons, but Chaz was already inside their circle, too close for guns to matter. He drove an elbow into the nearest man's temple, spun, swept another's legs, and caught a third's wrist mid-draw, twisting until the pistol clattered to the wet concrete. Rico backpedaled, reaching for his own piece, but Chaz closed the distance in 2 strides and slammed him against a shipping container. The impact rang like a bell. Chaz pinned Rico's gun hand above his head, knee pressed into his ribs. "Listen carefully," Chaz said, voice low and cold. "See that camera?" He nodded toward the dock's security lens, which he'd had Mateo redirect before they arrived. "It's recording. You're going to tell it everything." Rico's grin faltered. "You're bluffing." Chaz leaned in, applying pressure. "The tow truck. The trunk swap. The insider, who sold you my patterns. Say it." Rico's breath came in shallow gasps. Around them, his men were groaning, disarmed, nursing broken grips and bruised ribs, alive, but neutralized. No bullets. No bodies. Just calculated, surgical violence. "Fine." Rico spat. "We grabbed the nurse. Paid some dock guys, used a tow truck, swapped her into the sedan outside your place. Used the kid to bait you." He coughed, defiant. "Your boy Mateo? He sold us your schedule. Said you'd open the door yourself if a kid knocked. We wanted to embarrass you. Chaz, make you look soft. Chaz held him there a moment longer, then stepped back, releasing him. Rico slumped against the container, clutching his ribs. This ends with you alive and recorded, Chaz said. He pulled out his phone, tapped twice. And in about 3 minutes, copies of this feed hit 6 different people. Families. A few cops who still care. Maybe even a journalist. Rico's face went white. You can't. I just did. Behind them, the rain began to slacken. The storm was passing. Across the city, in quiet offices and dimly lit rooms, phones were lighting up, files downloading, the balance tilting. Chaz turned and walked back to his convoy, leaving Rico gasping in the dark. The mistake was over. Dawn crept through the mansion's tall windows like an apology. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and exhausted. In the west parlor, Katherine had finally fallen asleep on the leather sofa, one hand still resting on David's shoulder. The boy sat beside her, yellow jacket clutched in his lap like a talisman, eyes half closed but refusing to let go of consciousness, refusing to stop guarding. Chaz stood in the doorway, watching them, a cup of coffee cooling in his hand. You didn't have to do this, Katherine said quietly, eyes still closed. Chaz glanced over. She wasn't asleep after all. Yes, I did. Katherine opened her eyes, meeting his gaze across the dim room. You owe me nothing, Chaz. I did my job. The words echoed, exactly what she'd said 3 years ago, outside the ICU at Mount Sinai. His sister Maria had been dying from pneumonia, her lungs filling faster than the ventilator could compensate. Katherine had worked a double shift, then refused to leave, sitting in that fluorescent corridor for 16 straight hours, checking monitors, adjusting for rates, advocating with attending physicians who wanted to move on to the next crisis. When Maria finally stabilized, Chaz had tried to pay her, thank her, offer her anything. Katherine had looked at him with those same tired, furious eyes and said, You owe me nothing. I did my job. Maybe, Chaz said now. But they used you to get to me. That changes the math. Katherine sat up slowly, careful not to wake David. What happens now? Chaz moved into the room, setting his coffee on the side table. Now I collapse the foundation, not the building. Rico's confession is already circulating. Families who bankroll him, cops who still remember their oaths, a DA who's been looking for leverage. I don't need to kill anyone. I just need to make doing business with him more expensive than cutting him loose. And if that's not enough, it will be. Because what I have on camera isn't just a confession. It's proof he's sloppy. In our world, sloppy is worse than disloyal. Katherine studied him, searching for something. You've changed. No, Chaz said quietly. I just finally have a reason to try. Footsteps in the hallway. Mateo appeared, travel bag in hand, face gray and hollow. He stopped when he saw Chaz. I'm ready. Chaz turned to face him. 2 choices. Exile with a 1-bag rule and a tail for 6 months, or I let the families know you're for sale. He paused. You stole my patterns, Mateo. Not my secrets. That's the only reason you're still breathing. Mateo swallowed hard, nodded once. Exile. Good. You leave in an hour. Don't come back. Mateo turned and disappeared down the hall. Chaz's phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and a ghost of a smile crossed his face. First domino, he said, showing Katherine the text. Rico's lieutenants just suspended operations. Waiting for word from above. Then the security monitor on the wall flickered. Chaz's eyes snapped to it. Outside camera, front driveway. A sedan rolling slowly toward the gate. Too slowly. A shadow in the driver's seat leaning out, something metallic glinting. The car exploded in a bright orange fireball, then collapsed inward. The blast contained, redirected by charges Chaz had placed along the perimeter 3 hours ago. The flames licked upward, then died. Smoke curled into the pale morning sky. Katherine stared at the screen. You knew. I anticipated, Chaz corrected. He pocketed his phone. Now they know I did. By mid-morning, the mansion study had transformed into a war room. Laptops spread across the mahogany desk, traffic camera feeds playing in tiled windows, and Katherine seated in the leather chair, hands wrapped around tea she wasn't drinking. "Start from the beginning," Chaz said quietly, standing behind the desk where his tech specialist, a veteran named Hayes, was scrubbing through city footage. Katherine's voice was steady, clinical. Nurse mode. Loading dock behind the clinic. 10:40 p.m. I was taking trash to the dumpster. Van pulled up, no plates. Two men, one limping, one with a scar. They had a tow truck waiting at the rail spur, trunk already open. Zip ties, tape, then the swap. She paused. They knew my shift ended at 10:30. They knew which door I'd use. Hayes tapped keys, pulling up footage. Got the tow truck. Rail spur, 10:52. The grainy image showed the vehicle idling under a broken streetlight. Swap happened here, transferred her to the sedan. Then River Road to your block. Chaz's jaw tightened. The choreography was precise. Someone had mapped every step. Behind them, Mateo sat in a straight-back chair, hands folded, waiting. Chaz turned to face him. "Tell me exactly what you sold." Mateo exhaled slowly. "Times. When you review shipments, always between 10 and midnight. Your door habit, you answer if a kid's involved, no matter the protocol. They asked what you couldn't ignore." His voice dropped. "I told them you'd step outside yourself if a child was scared enough." "Who bought it?" "Rico's money man. A financier named Carbone. He's got dock leases through a shell company, 2 judges in his pocket, Judge Hastings and Judge Ruiz. They smooth over cargo inspections, zoning violations." Mateo met Chaz's eyes. "It's not just Rico. It's a network." Chaz nodded to Hayes. "Start pulling lease records. Carbone's holdings, every dock connection." Katherine leaned forward, studying the frozen image of the 2 men from the rail spur footage. "Wait. Pull up hospital security from last month." Hayes obliged, and Katherine scanned the stills. "There. Loading bay, 3 a.m. That's them. Limp and Commissar. They were hanging around outside the ER." Hayes ran facial recognition, then whistled low. "Ex-dock hands. Both on Rico's cousin's payroll, guy named Sal Sabatini." Katherine looked at Chaz. "You're building a case, not a body count. But what if this doesn't work? What if mercy isn't enough?" Chaz was quiet for a moment, then picked up a USB drive from the desk. The peer confession, backed up, encrypted. "Then I make sure the tape never can. This doesn't disappear. It goes everywhere, press, feds, families who want Rico's seat. If they come at me again, they do it knowing the world's watching." Katherine held his gaze. "That's not mercy. That's insurance." "It's both." Chaz turned back to Hayes. "How fast can we move on those dock leases?" "Carbone's shell company has 12 properties. I can have purchase offers from anonymous LLCs in front of the real owners by 10 a.m. With the right pressure. Do it. By noon, I want those leases shifted out of Carbone's control." Hayes grinned. "On it." Chaz's phone buzzed. A text from one of his municipal contacts. Hastings just got subpoenaed. Ruiz lawyered up. The first cracks were showing. The network was feeling the weight. Katherine watched the screens flicker, the city's invisible architecture coming into focus. "You're not just stopping Rico. You're dismantling the whole machine." "One lease at a time," Chaz said. By noon, the money stopped screaming. By noon, money was moving through the city, like a ghost changing shape. Fulton dock revenues, once flowing into Rico's shell accounts, were rerouted through anonymous foundations Chaz had established years ago for exactly this kind of surgical strike. Emergency grants landed in the accounts of a women's shelter on the Lower East Side and funded the night shift at Katherine's clinic. No press releases. No gratitude expected. Just quiet transformation, the kind that didn't make headlines but changed lives before sunrise. In the mansion's west wing, the guard detail had evolved into something else entirely. One of the veterans, a former Marine named Shen, sat cross-legged on the parlor floor with David, teaching him breathing drills. 4 counts in, hold 4 counts out, Chin said, his voice calm and steady. David followed, small chest rising and falling, the tremor in his hands finally beginning to ease. Katherine watched from the doorway, something softening in her expression, gratitude mixed with relief. Chaz's phone buzzed. A text, terse and formal. Counsel requests your presence. 4 p.m. Lombardi's. He showed it to Katherine. They want blood. Will they get it? Not from me. Lombardi's backrooms smelled like cigar smoke and old grudges. 5 men sat around a table meant for cards and quiet violence, heads of the families that kept Manhattan's underworld running on agreements instead of wars. Chaz took the empty chair, setting a thin folder on the table in front of him. Sal Lombardi, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, spoke first. You embarrassed Rico Sabatini. Put him on camera like some two-bit hustler. Now, the whole city thinks we're soft. Rico put a nurse and a child in a trunk, Chaz replied evenly. I responded with precision, not spectacle. He's alive. His network is collapsing. And the tape ensures he can't retaliate without proving he's exactly what I showed him to be. Mercy looks like weakness, another voice said, Frank DeLucci, who ran the Bronx. The old rules were clear. You cross a line, you pay in blood. Chaz opened the folder, spreading documents across the table. Bank transfers. Lease agreements. Hospital security stills. The Limp and Commissar duo linked to 3 other kidnappings, all women, all used as leverage. This isn't mercy. This is strategy. Rico didn't just cross me. He's a liability to all of you. His crew is sloppy, documented, and tied to crimes that bring federal attention. He leaned forward. So here's the offer. Cut him loose, or I hand this to the cops who still care about their oaths. Either way, Rico's done. The only question is whether you go down with him. Silence settled over the room like smoke. Lombardi glanced at the others, then back at Chaz. The council abstains. Chaz stood, collecting the folder. Abstention wasn't neutrality, it was consent. The families were stepping back, letting the street deliver its own verdict. Rico was alone now, exiled by silence, judged by inaction. As Chaz walked out into the fading afternoon light, his phone buzzed again. A news alert. Doc financier Anthony Carbone under investigation. Assets frozen. The money had stopped screaming. Now it was just a whisper, fading into nothing. And somewhere in the city, Rico Sabatini was learning what it meant to be erased without a single shot fired. Matteo made his move at dusk, and it was desperate and stupid in equal measure. Chaz was reviewing security feeds in the study when Hayes burst through the door, face tight. Matteo's gone. Took one of the sedans 20 minutes ago. Left his travel bag behind. Chaz's jaw clenched. Where? Tracking says he's heading toward the clinic. Boss, Katherine and David are doing a follow-up appointment there right now. Chaz was moving before Hayes finished the sentence. The clinic's parking lot was empty except for 2 vehicles, Katherine's sedan and Matteo's, parked at an angle near the side entrance, like he'd arrived in a hurry. Chaz pulled up, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cool evening air. Through the glass doors, he could see Katherine in the waiting area, David beside her, both unharmed. And Matteo, standing 10 feet away, blocking a man in a dark jacket, one of Rico's crew. Chaz recognized the build. Hands raised, talking fast. Chaz entered quietly through the side door. I'm telling you it's over, Matteo was saying, voice strained. Rodriguez already buried your boss. Walk away. The hitter's hand drifted toward his waistband. Carbone says otherwise. Says there's still a contract. There's no contract, Chaz said, voice cutting through the tension like steel. Everyone turned. The hitter's eyes widened. Matteo's face went pale. Chaz walked forward, calm and deliberate, positioning himself between the hitter and Katherine. You walk out now, you live. You stay, I call the 3 cops parked 2 blocks over who'd love an excuse to search you. The hitter weighed his options for exactly 2 seconds, then turned and left, footsteps echoing across the tile. Chaz waited until the door closed, then turned to Matteo. Outside. Now. In the parking lot, Under the flicker of a dying streetlight, Chaz faced his former security chief. You trying to redeem yourself? I was trying to protect them. You almost got them exposed. Chaz's voice was quiet, cold. You sold what makes me me, Mateo. The one thing people knew they could count on. That I'd come to the door, that I wouldn't turn away a kid. You turned that into bait. And now you're trying to fix it by playing hero? He shook his head. You don't get to be loyal after you're bought. Mateo's shoulders sagged. What do you want me to do? Leave. One bag. Guard escort to the state line. You don't come back. You don't call. You live with what you did, somewhere far from here. Chaz stepped closer. Exile, not execution. That's more than you gave Katherine when you sold her schedule. Mateo nodded slowly, broken. I'm sorry. I know. That's why you're still breathing. Chin appeared with the travel bag and a sedan. Mateo climbed in without another word, and the car disappeared into the dusk. Katherine approached, David's hand in hers. You didn't kill him. No. Why? Chaz looked at her, then down at David, the boy who'd stood guard all night, who was finally beginning to steady. Because if I bury fewer men today, fewer boys knock tomorrow. Katherine's expression softened. You're learning. Slowly. Chaz's phone buzzed. A news alert lighting up the screen. Rico Sabatini survives internal vote, but faces financial collapse. Cousin Sal Sabatini reported missing. Federal investigation pending. The street had rendered its verdict. Rico was alive but erased. And the knife no one saw had cut deeper than any bullet. The anonymous text came at midnight. Pier 14. 1 hour. Finish what you started. Chaz read it twice, then showed it to Hayes. Rico's making his last play. Could be a trap. It is. That's why we're bringing our own stage. An hour later, Pier 14 was lit up like a crime scene. Portable floodlights, Chaz's floodlights, turned night into a harsh, bleached day. 3 of his veterans wore body cameras, audio feeds redundant and cloud-backed. Every angle covered, every word recorded. This time, there would be no shadows to hide in. Rico Sabatini stood in the center of the dock, alone, arms spread wide like a prophet awaiting judgment. His crew was gone, scattered, bought off, or smart enough to see how this ended. He looked thinner than before, hollowed out by pressure and frozen accounts. Chaz approached on foot, hands visible, no weapon drawn. Behind him, Chun and 2 other veterans fanned out, cameras rolling. You came, Rico said, his grin sharp but brittle. I knew you would. Can't help yourself, can you? Always gotta be the hero. I came to finish it, Chaz replied evenly. Rico laughed, the sound edged with desperation. Then do it. Right here. On camera. Show everyone what you really are, just another killer in a nice suit. Shoot me. Chaz, make me the martyr. Give my name weight again. Chaz stopped 10 feet away. You want me to write your ending for you? I want you to stop pretending you're different. Chaz pulled out his phone, tapped twice, and Rico's own voice filled the dock, amplified through portable speakers Hayes had positioned an hour earlier. We grabbed the nurse. Paid some dock guys, used a tow truck, swapped her into the sedan. Used the kid to bait you. Your boy Mateo sold us your schedule. We wanted to embarrass you. Rico's face went white as his confession echoed across the concrete, carrying over the water, broadcasting to every phone Hayes had linked into the feed. The families were listening. The street was listening. You already wrote your ending, Chaz said quietly. I'm just making sure everyone hears it. Movement at the edge of the dock, Limp and Komiscar, trying to slip away into the container stacks. Chin and the other veterans moved like clockwork, cutting off angles, dropping both men with joint locks and controlled force. No bullets. Zip ties. Cuffs, not coffins. Rico stared at his fallen crew, then back at Chaz. You think you've won? You think this is over? It's been over since you put a woman in a trunk. Chaz turned to leave, then paused. The difference between us, Rico? You thought the spectacle mattered. I just needed the receipt. As Chaz walked back to his vehicle, police scanners across the city crackled to life. An anonymous data packet, meticulously compiled, legally airtight, landed on a DA's desk. Bank records. Kidnapping evidence. Witness statements. Rico would be picked up by morning on a dozen lesser charges. But the street had already rendered the real verdict. By the time the floodlights went dark, Rico Sabatini was a ghost, alive, but erased. No martyrdom. No legend. Just a voice on a recording, confessing to the city that he'd mistaken a man's principle for weakness. And the door he'd tried to break down? It was still standing. Still opening. Still judging who deserved to walk through. Morning came soft and unhurried, the kind of light that forgives. In the west parlor, David slept on the sofa without clenching his fists, without jerking awake every 20 minutes. His yellow raincoat hung on a peg by the door, clean, dry, waiting. In the kitchen, Katherine sat at the long marble counter, eating a full breakfast for the first time in 3 days. Eggs. Toast. Coffee she actually tasted. Chaz stood by the window, phone in hand, watching the city wake up. Hayes appeared in the doorway. Doc leases finalized. 12 properties now under holding companies that'll never touch criminal revenue. Clean owners, clean books. Chaz nodded. And the foundations? Paperwork filed. 3 shelters, 2 clinics, 1 safe house program. First grants disperse next week. Hayes paused. You're really doing this? I already did it. Katherine looked up from her plate. What happens now? To you, I mean. Chaz pocketed his phone and turned to face her. I keep the door open. Any knock from a child gets answered. By me first. That's the new protocol. Non-negotiable. You're making yourself a target. I was always a target. Now I'm just choosing what I'm a target for. Katherine set down her fork, studying him with the same sharp gaze she'd used in the ICU 3 years ago. Are we square, Chaz? You and me? He considered the question, then shook his head. No. We're safer. That's better than square. A quiet smile touched her lips. Yeah. It is. Footsteps on the hardwood, small, tentative. David appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, jacket still on its peg. He looked at Chaz, then out the window at the clear sky. Is the rain gonna come back? He asked, voice steady now, no tremor. Chaz crouched down to meet his eyes. Not tonight. David nodded, processing that, then glanced back at the door, the same door he'd stood outside of 3 nights ago, crying and desperate. Now it was just a door. Open. Waiting. The kind of door that meant safety instead of fear. Can I stay a little longer? David asked. Mom says we can go home, but I like it here. Katherine came over, resting a hand on her son's shoulder. We'll visit. Mr. Rodriguez isn't going anywhere. Chaz stood, and for the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. The empire was shrinking, dismantling itself by design. The docks were clean. The foundations were funded. The men who'd mistaken patience for weakness were gone, exiled, arrested, or erased by their own recorded confessions. And the door? The door stayed open. Not because Chaz Rodriguez was merciful, not because he was soft, but because some doors you close on a city and some you leave open for a boy in a yellow raincoat who needs to know that knocking means someone will answer. If anyone knocked again, it would be because they finally knew it opened. 2 weeks later, Katherine found the envelope on her desk at the clinic, unmarked, cream-colored, expensive. Inside, a cashier's check for $50,000 and a single-type note. For the hospital's safe exit program. First grant of many. No names necessary. She held it for a long moment, then looked out the window toward the part of the city where mansions hid behind iron gates and men like Chaz Rodriguez quietly rewrote the rules. Thank you, she whispered to no one. Somewhere across town, a door stood ready. And the rain, for now, had stopped.